Well, thanks for coming in. Sorry for the technical difficulty. Our machine isn't working today, our projector. So I have handouts for you. So today we're going to be discussing teeth names, teeth numbers, and quads and sections. So at the end of this lecture, you should be able to be real familiar with the numbers and names and how they're all presented in the dental world. So it's the universal numbering system that we use. So this is so that everybody's using the same numbering system, so that in dentistry, no one's pulling the wrong tooth or working on the wrong tooth. So we all assume that everybody has all their teeth. So we have 32 teeth in the mouth, and the numbering system starts on the upper right-hand side. With the first set of teeth, there's 3 teeth. They're called molars. We number 1, which is the 3rd molar, which is actually the wisdom tooth also. Everyone knows that by the wisdom teeth because you usually get them pulled. The number 2 would be the 2nd molar. Number 3, would be the 1st molar. And these are these teeth are meant for chewing. So they do a lot of the heavy lifting in the mouth. You move on to the next 2 teeth, which are the premolars. They're also called bicuspids. So number 4, you'd have your 2nd bicuspid, and number 5 would be your 1st bicuspid. You move on from there, and then you have your cuspid, which is also has many names. Do you know one of the names for a cuspid?
No.
How about an eye tooth? Have you heard of an eye tooth?
I have.
Or a canine?
Yes.
That's the same thing. They're all the same thing. So a cuspid, eye tooth, canine. So you move on from there. That was number 6.
Okay.
So number 7, we're going to, it's called the lateral. It's one of your front teeth, your 4 front teeth.
Okay.
Next to the lateral will be your central. That's your front tooth. So that's the set of teeth. It gets real easy from here because it's the same names of the teeth, but just in reverse order.
Okay.
So we're going on to the left-hand side now. So the first tooth on there, that's actually number 9, and that is the central.
Mm-hmm.
Number 10 would be, do you remember what we discussed just a few minutes ago?
The eye tooth.
Nope. The lateral.
The lateral.
You forgot about the lateral. So the lateral is right next to the central. Then comes
Then the eye tooth.
the eye tooth,
Yes.
which is also called the cuspid,
Yeah.
or the canine.
Mm-hmm.
So we move on from there, and then we have number 12,
Mm-hmm.
which would be the 1st bicuspid, or premolar.
Oh, okay.
And then we move to number 13, which would be the 2nd premolar, or 2nd bicuspid.
Oh.
We then go into our molars. So we have our 1st molar, which is number 14. Number 15 would be our 2nd molar. And number 16 would be your 3rd molar, also known as your wisdom tooth. Another wisdom tooth.
Cool.
So from left to right we went.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to jump down to the bottom teeth. And then we're going to go from left to right on the bottom. That's how the numbering system works.
Mm-hmm.
So since we had 16 was the molar on the upper left, on the lower left we go to 17, which would be your lower molar, which is called?
Your chewing tooth or your wisdom tooth.
Your wisdom tooth, that's right. And then we go to 18, which is your 2nd molar.
Mm-hmm.
19,
Mm-hmm.
which would be your 1st molar. And then we move into the premolars, also known as
What?
bicuspids.
Oh, yeah.
So we go from there. That's number 20 is the 2nd bicuspid. Number 21 is the 1st bicuspid. Number 22 would be the canine, cuspid, eye tooth. A lot of names, right?
So many names.
So, and then we go into 23, which would be the lateral.
Lateral.
And then your central, number 24. Then we're moving on to the right side, so we go with our central again.
Central 24.
Central 25, lateral 26, cuspid 27, 28, the first bicuspid, 29, the second bicuspid, 30 would be your molar again, your first molar, 31, your second molar, and 32, your third molar.
Your wisdom tooth.
Your wisdom tooth. Great. So that's how you see it. You see it as a whole. You see it from left to right, from right to left on the top, which is actually called, your top teeth are actually called your maxillary teeth. Your bottom teeth are called your mandibular teeth. So the numbering system starts on the maxillary right, goes from 1 to 16, and then drops down to the mandibular left, and goes from 17 to 32, all the way back to the right.
Wow, that's so cool.
So we're looking at all the teeth now, and we have all the names and all the numbers. We're going to discuss the different areas. We call them quads, meaning 4. The quads are separated into 4. So the quad number 1, you take you start at the upper of the maxillary right again, and you take from that number 1 all the way to the central. That's right. So that would be quad 1. So the maxillary right side is quad 1. Then you go from number 9 on the left side all the way to number 16, which is quad number 2. And again, you drop down to the left side, to the mandibular left side, and that mandibular left side from the third molar, number 17, all the way to number 24, which is the central on the left side there. That would be quad 3. Quad 4 would be the rest of the teeth on the mandibular right side. So from 25 to 32. So if, knowing this, if a patient didn't have their maxillary first molar on the right side, which would be number 3, you wouldn't, when you're counting teeth, you wouldn't skip over that and say 1, 2, 3 would be the second bicuspid then. No, 3 is missing, and then you'd still have 4 in there. So that's why the numbering system is so important.
Oh, okay.
Make sense?
It does.
You have any questions up to this point?
No.
Oh, good. We also separate into sextants.
What's a sextant?
A sextant is you're splitting up into 6 areas. Okay?
Okay.
And what you do is you have anterior teeth and posterior teeth. Your posterior teeth are your bicuspids, from your first bicuspid to your third molar.
Okay.
So your molars and bicuspids in all quadrants. Okay. Your anterior teeth are from your cuspid to cuspid on the right to the cuspid on the left, maxillary and mandibular. Okay. So you have those areas. So to split it up into 6 areas, you take sextant number 1 would be on the maxillary right side, from your molar to your first premolar, first bicuspid. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay. So your posterior teeth on the maxillary right side is sextant 1.
Okay.
Sextant 2 is actually from cuspid to cuspid on the maxillary. So you're looking at your all your anterior teeth up there, which would be your cuspid, your lateral, and your central on both the right and the left side. Then your sextant 3 would be your left side, maxillary left side, the posterior teeth.
Okay.
You get the pattern?
I'm getting the pattern.
So now you jump down to the left side, because we're on the left, so we're going to jump down to the mandibular teeth for sextant 4.
Okay.
Can you guess on what teeth are covered in sextant 4?
From the molar to the lateral.
No, close. From the third molar to the first bicuspid. Remember your laterals are anterior teeth.
Oh yeah.
So your posterior teeth is sextant 4, and that covers your molars and your premolars, or your bicuspids.
Okay.
Sextant 5 would be your anterior teeth. So that goes from your cuspid?
Cuspid to your cuspid.
Cuspid to cuspid, very good. That would be sextant 5, and sextant 6, obviously on the mandibular right side, would be the molars and premolars.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yes, it does.
Good. Next, we're going to get into the surfaces of the teeth. All right. When we're charting in the dental world, pointing out where the cavities are, pointing out where current fillings are, we need to know that what part of the tooth we're talking about, what surface of the tooth we're talking about. So now we have, it's very important to know the numbers
Yes.
of the tooth you're talking about, or the name, or both, because there's some dentists that use strictly numbers. There's other dentists that use strictly names. Obviously numbers are going to be easier,
Yes.
but I've worked with dentists in the past, especially the old school dentists. They'll say the second bicuspid on the maxillary right side has a whatever.
Really?
Yes. So if you're not thinking,
You're confused.
this is why it's very important to know both the numbers and names of all the teeth.
Okay.
So when we're going to start talking about the different surfaces of the teeth, we're going to start off by labeling on your sheet. All right, in between the centrals, in between the maxillary
Yes.
centrals, between 8 and 9,
Mm-hmm.
that divides the right and left side. We're going to put an imaginary line right through there, and that's called the midline.
Okay.
We're going to do the same thing on the mandibular teeth, between 24 and 25. That's right between the two centrals. Imaginary line called the midline. The midline is very important when dealing with the surfaces of the teeth. It's because we're going to talk about the front of the teeth first. The front of the teeth is called your facial. Okay, this is a part of your teeth that actually you see when you smile. Okay, they are against your lips. That's called your facial. The facial portion of the teeth are for your anterior teeth.
Okay.
So from cuspid to cuspid, the facial portion is the portion of the tooth that rests against your lips.
Okay.
Now your cheeks, it's the same surface, but for the posterior teeth, it's still resting against your cheeks. That same surface is called the buccal. Okay, it kind of gets confusing, but again, there are some dentists out there that will call a posterior buccal a posterior facial. Yeah. Technically, that's wrong, but you're not going to sit there and correct your doctor.
Right.
You're going to say, yes, sir, let me mark that down for you.
Yes.
But just so you know, it's the same surface. The facial surface and the buccal surface are the same surface, but you use the word facial for the anterior and buccal for the posterior. You got it?
Got it.
Any questions?
No.
Great. Now we're going to look at the tongue surface of the tooth. All around, no matter if it's posterior or anterior, it's going to be called the lingual. And the way I always remembered it, your lingual, your tongue, talking, linguistics. So it's easy to kind of remember if you get that in your head. Lingual is the tongue side of the teeth. And that's, like I said, posterior, anterior, it's all called the same on it. We're not trying to confuse you on that one. All right?
Just like the buccal stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Buccal and facial, different story. Now we're going to the biting surface of the teeth. The posterior teeth, the biting surface is called the occlusal surface. It's actually a flat surface where you're doing most of your chewing. It's called your occlusal surface. If you think of, again, a nice little hint that I always had was, a little trick was your occlusion is your two teeth coming together is your occlusion. So occlusal, it only makes sense. And I'm sure that's where they got it from, but I pretend that I make up my own stuff and didn't copy off anyone. So, but everyone has their own way of remembering things, and that's just a trick I used. So, Now comes the tricky part. The sides of the teeth. Okay? The sides of the teeth, you have to use, this is where the midline comes important. Okay? We're going to start with the maxillary right side. And the midline, the part of the tooth farthest away from the midline. So you look at each tooth separately. So if we take number 8, the farthest portion away from the midline of that tooth, that side is called the distal. And you keep doing that every tooth. The farthest point of that tooth, side of that tooth away from the midline is the distal. Again, distal, distance, far away from the midline. That always helped me out. The part of the tooth that's closest to the midline is called the mesial. I have no tricks for that, just know it. Memorize it and know it. You're going to be using these terms a lot.
Wow.
These are terms you use on every patient to determine where there's calculus, if you're cleaning teeth, where there's calculus, where there's plaque, where there's fillings, where there's cavities. They're going to use these words. The maxillary second bicuspid on the right side has a mesial occlusal. So, and they actually cut it down even less than that because they'll say MO. And they'll do it really quick. And so you know automatically MO means mesial occlusal. So the mesial is the portion of the tooth closest to the midline, and the occlusal is the biting surface. So you know that cavity or filling extends from the biting surface to the closest toward the midline. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Got it. So this is where it gets tricky, because now you're saying to yourself on the right side, the distal is on the left side here, and the mesial is on the right side. But now we're going to the left side, and that's not true anymore.
Right.
It's the opposite, because the midline's over here now. Now I'm over here, the midline's here. This side of me is the mesial side because it's closest to the midline. This side of me is the farthest away from the midline, so this is the distal. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Good. This is one of the hardest concepts that a lot of people mix up. And then you drop down to the mandibular left side, and same thing. You look at that midline that's in between the centrals, 24 and 25. And when you're on the mandibular left side, whatever's farthest away from the distal, closest, mesial. This way? M&M. There you go. So, that's how you determine the midline and the tooth surfaces. Now, the one surface that we didn't cover was the biting surface of your anterior teeth. They're real thin. They're meant for ripping or chewing. They're not really chewing, but ripping, and then the food gets tossed in the back for chewing purposes. Well, that edge, it's more like an edge, and they actually put it in the name. It's called the incisal edge, and that's for all your anterior teeth.
Oh, okay.
So that's another way you can separate anterior and posterior. Anterior teeth all have incisal edges. Posterior teeth all have occlusal surfaces. Make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Any questions to this point?
No.
No? Any stories you want to share?
No.
I thank you for being the only one that showed up to class today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
So this class usually lasts a little bit longer, but because you were just right on time and ready and raring to go. The lesson objectives for today was to know the tooth numbering system,
Okay.
to know the names of each tooth, to know the surfaces of each tooth, and to be able to differentiate between the sextants and quadrants, and knowing what the midline is and what that means and why it's important. Tomorrow, we're going to have a little test, okay? So, take this home,
Okay.
study it.
Okay.
If you have any questions, I'll have some some question and answer segment before tomorrow's class. And then we'll get right into the test and see where we're at on the learning process.
Sounds good.
All right, any questions, any,
No,
no? Well, thank you again.
thank you.
So you have a great day.